By way of an introduction, Matt Egan is a director of technical strategy of corporate dev at Okta, and he works with their Okta Ventures portfolio companies and ISV partners. And Ben Rice is our VP of Biz Dev at Bitglass. Ben, Matt, I'll hand it over to you guys. Maybe just a quick note. You guys are both really dynamic, so I'll just throw this out there. You can never quite control what shows up in the Q&A bar. And maybe just to break the ice, I do see this very random question. At the age of 10, can you share what your dream job was? So I might just throw that out there as a nice way for you to open up and share a little bit about yourselves. But it kind of threw me off and surprised me just a little bit. But Matt, Ben, off to you guys.
What did I want to be when I was 10? This is funny. I wanted to be like a truck driver, I think, when I was 10. I was always just enamored with being on the road and seeing new stuff. And I thought, driving truck would be a great way to do that. Retrospectively, I'm glad that that's not the path that I chose, because I've seen the places, having had more opportunities to be out on the road and filling up at gas stations that happen to be truck stops. I don't think it's as glamorous as my 10-year-old mind thought it was. So anyways, that's where I was, Ben. I don't know if you can top that.
You're prepared for that.
I remember back at that time, we were just getting into Apple computers. So I definitely was interested in working at some place like Apple or Atari. Other considered professions at that time were Major League Baseball and stand-up comedy. So other than the Major League Baseball, I've kind of combined them all. And hopefully you'll see some comedy in our routine here. And the reason being, we're definitely going to talk about some serious security stuff, but we want to try to keep it light and not try to scare you into doing something or not doing something, but use humor as a way to make this topic more accessible and to get you to really think about it. So looking forward to the discussion. So the first thing we're going to talk about is...
And Ben, and I don't do I want to share these slides? I can't remember. Kevin, I know we rehearsed this and we talked about it. Do you want me to share these slides? I can.
Yes, Matt, go ahead and share the slides, or Ben, you can also share as well. I'll defer.
I'll throw them off. That way we got them.
Okay, sounds good.
I'm going to make this awkward for everybody really quick now.
Thanks, Matt.
Now I need to get my Zoom windows back. There we go. All right.
So something we've kind of already been talking about, zero trust. And, one of the things Matt and I want to convey is sort of the interrelationship between zero trust and SASE and, what that's all about. And, maybe I'll just start and say, from my perspective, both of these things are architectures. They're not things that you can buy by themselves. And so it's really a mindset that you need to broadcast across your organization, particularly zero trust. SASE is probably more for the IT folks and the networking and security folks in terms of thinking about how you want to set up your interactions and your devices and your, where your data is and how to manage that. Whereas zero trust is something I think that anybody that's using any type of system should be aware of and should try to start to think about. Because of the prevalence of attacks and, a simple fact that the bad guys in the world that do system and computer hacking are 10 to 100 times bigger and more well-funded than the security industry. So I live here in the Bay Area. I'm very proud of the industry I work in. I think I wake up every day to help save the world, but we're massively outgunned and outfunded. I mean, we're at the point now where many of the attacks we see are engendered by nation state actors, people that are acting loosely at the behest of a country. And so if you think about you as an individual at home or your company fighting a nation state seems pretty daunting. However, there are things we can do, and some of them just, are the education that we give to the employees and the users of these systems on how to be careful and what best practices are. So, maybe a little bit of zero trust came from Google. If you don't know, Google was hacked in the mid 2000s in a very bad way, as was Adobe. And Google decided to come up with a framework, which was called Beyond Corp, and eventually became kind of what we talk about today at Zero Trust. And it really had to do with changing the notion that the network that you come from, if trusted, is sufficient to allow you access and authorization. And what that really meant then, and maybe even still in a lot of places, is if I have a VPN client and I'm able to connect, I can do whatever I want because my traffic's encrypted. Because I logged in, therefore I'm a trusted person, and I should be able to roam about the network. Obviously wrong, because if my system gets compromised or something of that nature, then I can just go anywhere that person who I compromised can go. And so rather than trust the network that you're coming from, Google said, hey, the inside of our network and the outside of our network are now the same. Which means if we're going to let people roam around the internal part of the network that can just access it, we've got to go through some checks to make sure we know who they are. So first thing is, what's the device the person's coming from? Are they who they say they are? And if we pass those two checks, then we allow someone access, then we want to have some authorization level and limit them to least privilege, only the things they need access to, and not give them unfettered access to everything. And then a fourth critical part is to review the access, review all this information, and this can be done using security tools or databases or other aggregation points, but to look at what's happening and to adapt our tactics because the adversaries will change theirs. So I'll kind of stop there, maybe let Matt have a chance to comment on that. And hopefully we leave you with at least some education about what this is and then about how you can use it yourself.
No, I like that. I was actually just sit back and watch Ben go for 20 minutes. No, that's I like the way you tee that up. SASE being something that hey, there's a structure and it's actually meaning zero trust being. And I've done a couple of other webinars this week, and somebody else said this, so I'm going to steal it. Theft being a great form of flattery here. That zero trust was like a lifestyle choice. And that's kind of I think that helps people too when it's not a destination, it's not a specific architecture, it's not a if you go do this now you've achieved zero trust, right? It's a journey. It doesn't necessarily end. And I think as we get into I'm going to advance these slides because that'll kind of have a talking point to go along with it. The other thing too, you call out, some of this history, right? We talk about zero trust. I think we talk about zero trust more in the past few years, thanks to, the works that were released by Google talking about the Beyond Corp model, and that really thrust zero trust into, the limelight. But it's a concept that's been around for a long time. It used to be, things like default closed, or all my firewall ports are, I'm default closed. It was the opposite of the trust but verified mindset, and it was the no. It's just this default closed mindset, and so I think when we take that and say, hey, that was the way you did it in yesteryears when all you had was layer 3 firewall rules that you could do. Think of where we come from a technology perspective, and I work for an identity company, so I'm gonna definitely pound on identity here, but look at what's happened in the industry, in the space, with Bitglass and other innovations. Throughout the tech stack, and then the ability now to take things up a layer higher, in the OSI model, and not be limited to, IP, destinations and ports and things like that, where we can have a higher level of fidelity of information about what's actually, transiting across our networks and what data is going where and who's doing what. And now we can really start to realize that Beyond Corp model of applying, security controls based off of who the actor is and what the target is, and really, applying, great things there. So, right, so we got this overlay this backdrop slide, that's talking about a maturity curve, and this is very identity centric. So I think you can take this and working for an identity company at Okta, when that's my tool, every problem starts to look like a nail, right? When a hammer's the only tool I have, every problem starts to look like a nail. So, that's the case. I look through this very much through an identity lens, and then you can see, what this zero trust journey and maturity curve, we call it in here, looks like as you start to, modernize and mature and take advantage of what identity, gives you in the background. Right? I'm not gonna read the words to you, but essentially, right, just taking more and more bits of information that are available, more and more modern applications and services, and taking advantage of all of those things that are offered up, and moving closer and closer to that, that end goal. Well, again, I said it's not necessarily a destination. You're not ever going to get to a point. You're fighting against nation state actors. You're fighting against well-funded and very creative creative people. But when we can make it harder for them, make it to the point where they actually need to go and use exploits versus just lifting usernames and passwords to go out and compromise networks. So thoughts there, Ben?
Yeah, so I mean, at one point, it was sufficient just to lock down your firewall, and the way that people would try to hack into your network or to get at your data was to just try to smash through the front door, find a vulnerability, find a hole. And the perimeter was very well shored up. Checkpoint, Cisco, all the networking and security companies we can think of from the 90s and the 2000s. A lot of equipment was sold, a lot of policy was put in, and the perimeter was pretty well hardened, and so it became difficult just to kind of blow through someone's windows or doors to their offices, as it were. But what happened, and where we are today, is over time, those types of controls have been avoided and thwarted by stealing credentials. So rather than find my way in because somebody left a door open, I'm just going to steal the access card, if you will, of a legitimate employee. And so even though I don't look like Matt Egan, if I steal Matt Egan's entry pass, I can get into any Okta building I want. And because, Matt, or maybe I'll just use myself as an example. I'm a regular worker. I'm trained in security technologies, and I do phishing tests and all those sort of things. But I can still be fooled. I'm not above that. And so a threat actor, the best thing they can do is just target an individual person. And so because we all keep our stuff on LinkedIn, if I'm a hacker, I can look for a list of network administrators. I can look for a list of salespeople. I can basically look for the sitting duck that I want to attack. And so once I get that credential, then I can go in and do whatever I want. So identity becomes really important. And if you think about the maturity slide there that Matt had up, you go from, on-premise Active Directory to the next state, which is actually not easy to achieve, but single sign-on for all your applications, a unified method for everyone to log in and a way to record that, multi-factor authentication, and then policies across anything. So Okta calls that unified IAM. I would submit that is a step to take, with a company like Okta. Get to that point and you're going to be better off than a lot of people. The more fancy stuff there is stuff you should worry about once you get through stage one. But I would love to see every company in the United States get to stage one, because just implementing MFA across applications will provide a huge benefit. So if hackers do target credentials and steal them, which, by the way, statistically is about 90% of the breaches are caused by that. And then in those cases, about 90% of those, privileged users' credentials are then taken and the person gets laterally around the network. So they get in with maybe a regular user, and then once they're in, they abuse their privileges of someone else to get even higher access. So at some point, stage 2 and stage 3 becomes important. But I encourage everyone to consider getting to stage 1 first.
Yeah. It's funny as you said that. It reminded me of like one of my own lines too that I used to have is we broke down the Verizon data breach report, from 2017, 2018, 2019, right? Some of the percentages have changed, but there's such an overwhelming majority of the breaches that ultimately just boil down to like credential theft or attacks that were targeted to get credentials. And I surmised it with something, something cute or quippy that was like, most hackers don't hack, but when they do hack, they're really just trying to get credentials, because at the end of the day, logging into a system is much easier than hacking a system, and exploiting a user or exploiting some unthought of piece of technology to be able to go get credentials to then just go log in is way easier. So it's funny. We definitely see that the same. You know, and I glossed over this. I'm glad you harkened back to it. You know, thinking about that pain point and how much benefit. I mean, there's as you move from stage 0 to stage 1, stage 2, you know, 1 to 2, you're getting these incremental benefits. But man, going from 0 to 1, you know, is just huge. And you think about the passwords everywhere bullet point and like how real that is. I'm assuming, you know, this is a, you know, Bitglass and a SASE and a digital transformation, you know, conversation. You know, we're talking to, you know, people that I'm thinking are forward thinking. You know, if you don't have single sign-on and you're using 4 or 5 different SaaS applications, and if you're only using 4 or 5, you're on the low end, right? You know, the number of SaaS applications are being used, whether they're wall to wall or not, right? Find that niche person, you know, within your organization, you know, that maybe has 20 of these different SaaS applications, and think about the hygiene associated with provisioning those accounts, having good password policies, having these disconnected password policies, knowing that if one of those systems was breached, your users, like all users, are probably not the best, you know, hygienic password, you know, users, and that password from system A that maybe got compromised is probably the same password they use on system B, C, and D, and just how big of a problem that is. Or, you know, if you look at the lifecycle management of an account, onboarding somebody and having them be productive on day 1, when there's like manual steps that are required to get their accounts active and running in 4 or 5 different systems. And then the scarier side of that, when somebody leaves a company, especially if they leave on bad terms, how quickly can you get there? Do you have processes in place that are going to, you know, have those same manual processes fire to make sure that access is rescinded, you know, in a timely fashion, right? So that the benefit that's realized as you move from stage 0 to stage 1 is just huge. And sometimes I take it for granted because, you know, for 8+ years, you know, 4 years working at Okta, 4 years prior to being a customer of Okta, I've already been in that stage 1 phase. And so I think I take it for granted that that's like the amount of benefit that you realize, you know, moving from stage 0 to stage 1 is you know, probably can't be overstated. Well, we kind of addressed this. I think we were moving now to just kind of, you know, how do we tie identity and zero trust together? You know, where do they meet? Ben, I don't know if you've got thoughts. I can float into this one, but I just got done kind of all the words out there.
Sure, I'll jump in. So I mean, essentially, we all need to be this person on the right. You know, with all this stuff going on in our brain, we have to make the right choices. But you know, the fact is, most organizations can't protect every single crack all the time. And if you're really embracing this digital transformation, what you're essentially doing is saying, it's okay that my users are everywhere. It's okay that my users are using their own device. It's okay that my data is stored in, you know, all kinds of different places now, and not just in a centralized database. So what we sort of need to do is build a bubble around each person that's out there, and each set of data and each device to the best we can, and make these things as resilient and flexible as possible. So it's a big mindset change from, you know, the thing that I need to protect is my home and my backyard and my front yard. And I put a fence around it and I can go to sleep. Well, while you're sleeping now, people can crawl over the fence. People can look through the holes in the fence. People can knock on windows and doors that are open and find a way in. And so we have to accept that that's going to happen. A user is going to mess up with it. How quickly are you going to be able to find it out? How quickly are you going to be able to do something about it? How quickly can you respond and fix things? So the key aspect of identity is understanding who the users are that we allow in, and then what are they doing? And to me, zero trust relates to that, in that one of the first steps in zero trust is to identify who the person is and are they okay. Once you know that, then you can apply policy and say, you know, this person normally logs in, you know, not from China, but from here. So we're going to MFA them. So the zero trust really is trust but verify.
Yep.
So, you know, thinking about parenting, you know, when you ask your kids about whether they did something wrong or not, and they say no, I mean, is that the end of the discussion? Or do you say, Let me go see if you really cleaned your room or not, or let me see if you really brushed your teeth. So those are simple analogies, but it's the same kind of thing I think we need to think about here is trust but
Yeah,
verify. That's kind of the thing.
Yeah, and I'm gonna I'm gonna draft off of that parenting analogy. Let's see if I can thread this together really quick. I think the trust but verify model, right? If it's zero trust, the kids have come and they're asking for X, Y, Z. We know it's the kid. We've got that. We know we don't trust them, but maybe they've come with some other things in it. And it's we talk about the identity and zero trust were those two big circles that were there. But think about all of the ancillary signals that are there. If your kid comes to you and maybe the clothes that they're wearing, or maybe the attitude that they came and presented, or some of these other ephemeral attributes of the request that they're making of you are really good indicators that you can use, right? You're not going to trust them, but they're good indicators to just kind of use, and maybe they're going to make your spidey senses tingle, and you're going to do the parent thing. You're going to dig a little bit deeper. Take that same concept, right? That's like adaptive MFA within Okta, or some of these other adaptive single sign-on or adaptive policies are going to be put in place, right? And it's a great way to kind of bridge that user experience too. If you've got intelligence and you're paying attention to all of these cues, whether it was the clothing or the tone of voice that your kids came as they came and asked that question, or whether it is how much do I know about this device? Is the device do I have good signals from the EDR vendor? Do I have good signals from the EMM that's in place? Is the disk encrypted? Is it trusted? Is it known? And maybe I'm going to give a contextual response to that too, right? As more and more of these systems downstream mature, Okta knows about the device trust. How about when we're able to kind of relay that downstream to a downstream system like Box or Salesforce, and they can then go and adapt what you're able to do. Maybe you're logging in from your BYOD device and the disk isn't encrypted. That's okay for you to log into Salesforce, but I don't want you to download reports because maybe that's going to fall outside of my DLP controls. So the contextual evaluation, the contextual responses, there's a lot of potential power that comes up in here. Some of these things we can realize today, some of these we're waiting for more and more technology, but just to take people along the journey of like what's possible when we do these things. So yeah, I don't know, maybe a ham-fisted analogy to carry on, but it was there. I'm just going to run with it, Ben.
Yeah, that's great. Many of us have kids, and so we have to deal with this all the time. And it's a similar relationship you need to have to your networks, your users, your data. It's an everyday thing. You don't get to not parent on certain days because you're tired of it. And protecting your assets and your users, and even as a user conducting your work every day, you have to really be thinking about this all the time. When you get that email. The phishing emails now are super, super smart and very, very well crafted. And so it's easy just to, in the habit of our day, to click on something bad. And so I think it's a key thing to consider educating people and continuing this message of being careful. You think of some of the wartime slogans we had in our country: loose lips sink ships, and that kind of thing. You kind of need to have these kind of slogans around the company around how to be careful and to avoid fish and these kind of things. But SASE offers a lot of promise for this. We're seeing a lot of news stories now about how employees of various companies are pushing back on the request to come back into the office for various reasons, without getting into the socioeconomic or cultural significance of those arguments or discussions. For our purposes, at the heart of it is that no matter what happens, some subset of people will now not work in the same place every day. So where that will be, the security architecture has to accommodate that. So it won't be sufficient for any company to say you cannot work at home ever. We see mutinies happening based on that. And it probably won't be sufficient for employees to say, I'll never come in the office again, or I'll only work at home. And as a result, we have to kind of change how we think about protecting things from what you see on the left, which we would say is legacy, towards what we're advocating for today, which is SASE. So maybe I'll let Matt kind of go through the different technologies. I see a question in the chat about, is there a risk of sprawl there's always a risk of sprawl. There's always guys like Matt and Ben trying to sell you something from their company. So I think one of the things to consider in SASE is, unlike the things on the left that were traditionally separate boxes and separate technologies, is there a way to get the things on the right from a smaller number of vendors? Is there a vendor that provides, 2 or 3 of these technologies, and then do they integrate well with another vendor that provides 2 or 3 of these technologies? No hints, but if you look at the shirts of the 2 guys talking, there's probably something there.
I muted myself because I've got my son out there mowing the lawn, which is fantastic to watch right here, guys. Anyways,
verify, Matt. Good job.
Yeah, verify. So I saw that the complexity and where did it go? It was went away. Anyways, adding that complexity as you add vendors, Ben's spot on, right? There's always this risk. I work in partnerships, and so I'm always wondering what is the 1 + 1 = 3 thing that we can do. And so I think I would encourage everybody. Maybe I've got a rosy lens on this because I'm not on the buying and implementing side anymore, but I really do wear a lot of my practitioner background and mindset as I'm out there approaching. What are we going to do from an integrations perspective with at Okta? What are the partners we're going to go and integrate with, and how can we amplify value when we do those things? I think there are more, and there's a big ecosystem of my counterparts of these other companies, Ben included, that have that same mindset. And so I think, while yes, it's going to shift the paradigm, and things do have an opportunity to get more complicated, I think they're going to be less complicated than the legacy solutions that we had. And they're going to have more amplified value, more integration points, more opportunities for exchanges of data, and really the onion effect of security that's going to come along with this. Yeah, and so there's another question too that's calling out one of these questions on SSO, and I think as I it's there in my head, so I need to answer it. It really doesn't go to the slide. I was going to try to make it fit in the slide. I can't do it. So the call out to this one. There's a couple of things, again, I'll harken back. This is one of the things that I started to put in place on our procurement side when I was operational, and I was the one that was evaluating these support for single sign-on. And if you already have an app that doesn't do this, is going to help, but don't miss the opportunity. Make it a procurement requirement as you're evaluating your providers and offerings that they have. That should be a requirement for any enterprise company that's out there trying to buy, and for anybody that's selling software in that space. It's table stakes at this point, right? So I would demand that as a feature from all of your vendors, and use everything you can. Your customers are going to have way more leverage than I'm going to have as a partner. I can reach out to them and say, hey, you guys should support single sign-on, but they're going to say, where does the money come from? That's customers, right? So customers demand that. And then I think, there are other ways, within Okta, we support those with a simple web app. Essentially, you end up with a browser plugin that knows how to deal with the credentials, and it will help you implement things like credential rotation. It takes that required password. You've got a legacy thing that does forms-based login, or some other basic auth or something like that. We can accommodate it, and it also opens up an opportunity where you can start to rotate those credentials outside of the user's purview. They don't need to be managing or in the middle of that password exchange anymore, which is always a good thing. If you can get the user out of that flow, the user experience is better. The opportunity for them to have bad password hygiene practices is minimized. So that's always good.
Great. Hey, we're getting to the end of our time here. I wanted to maybe wrap up with some final thoughts about this. So the ROI on going from what's on the left to the right is significant. So forget about all the technologies and what they do, and just think about all the talk that we've had about the cloud and utility computing over the years, and the analogy with the early days of electricity, where each individual company had to build out generators and electric system to generate their own power. And this was extremely inefficient. And eventually power companies came into being, and now people buy what we call PaaS, power as a service, right? We don't have a generator to our house. They just charge us by how much we use. So similarly, almost all the stuff on the right, if you're going to look at moving into SASE, you need to be looking at cloud services, things that are maintained by others. The stuff on the left is now maintained by you. These are appliances, software, things that need to be fed and cared for, power, rack space, updates, vulnerabilities, integration, all this stuff done by you or your staff. Free yourself and your staff, improve your security, and start to look at cloud services for security. So all the SASE stuff on the right should be somewhat cutting edge that you're going to look at. You should try to find a smaller number of vendors. You should try to find a consolidation of these functions just for the purpose of ROI, making it easier for your team to understand the tools and making it easier for you to implement and stay monitoring and stay with it. So my main message out of anything you can hear today is no matter what you hear from all of us, there is never any set and forget security. So no matter how good the vendor pitch, how good Gartner says it is, somebody in your organization has to pay attention to the output of whatever tool you're using. And whether that's winnowed into a SIM or something that can make the alerts and the information easier to understand, if you buy stuff to get an ROI on it, you have to have some monitoring or some interaction with it on a regular basis to make sure it's set correctly and to make sure you're paying attention to any alerts or problems that it might be highlighting for you. So I encourage you to get on your SASE journey, trust but verify, take a look at vendors that have more than one of these technologies well integrated, pay attention to what the analysts say about it, perhaps require customer references and things like that, and then take a look at what the uptime is of these services. Since I'm telling you to let somebody else run the service, make sure you ask how well they run the service before you sign up. Matt?
Huge +1. I think in the interest of time, I'm just going to end it with a +1. Ben nailed it. I don't have anything to add.
All right. Hey, thank you all for your time. Thank you, Matt, for your partnership and your willingness to support us on this day. And thank you all for paying attention. We still have quite a lot of people here on this webcast, and we still have a little bit more to go. So stay with us. Some of the best stuff's going to come. There's going to be a fireworks show, and I want you to see
it. Matt, Ben, thank you so much for that discussion.